Jay Hart. Welcome back to my channel. I'm building a 1932 Ford Roadster. I'm using the hood from a 1940 Ford to build a boat tail for the back of that Roadster. I'm blown away by the interest in this project and all the comments and feedback. And in some of those comments, people have asked to see some of the more detailed work in the project. There's a lot of shows that you can see a lot of that detailed work. There's all sorts of channels to learn how to weld and cut, grind, gas weld, TIG weld, MIG weld, whatever it is you want to do. I didn't realize people really wanted to see that on my show. I'll start adding some of those shots as we go along. Now, in the last episode, we sectioned the cowl. Horizontally, we took 2 inches out, and vertically, we took 4 inches out. We brought that whole thing down and made this nice compact version of a stock 1932 cowl. And I said we're going to set the car on the ground, we're going to walk around it, look at it, and we're going to try to figure out if we're going to go to the rear cross member, start boxing in the frame and finishing up some of that structure, or if we're going to stay in the front, put the radiator on, put the grill shell on, drop the grill shell down 2 inches, and get our hood lined up. Because we've sectioned the cowl 4 inches, we've got to take 2 inches out of the hood where it goes against the cowl. We got to take 2 inches out of this side and 2 inches out of the other side. But we want to run the stock width of the grill. So we don't want to take anything out of this. So I think what we're going to do is section this starting at 2 inches and bring it down to nothing. But that's going to change the line across the top here. It's going to tip that in, and it's going to change the line across the bottom. It's going to bow this out. So we're going to have to figure out how much we're going to have to add to it to get it all lined up. Now, I'm not going to drop the car down on the ground just yet, but I do want you to see the tail. I got the tail trimmed up. In the last episode, we cut the sides of this tail off. We got the flares off of the hood. We're going to start calling this a tail because it's now our tail. And if you recall, we just sort of roughed this in when we pinched the frame rails in. We looked at this radius here, and we looked at this radius here, and we tried to get something similar. We got a little bump out right here in the frame. It comes out a little bit further here, which I love because I didn't want these sides to be perfectly flat through here. I want these bubbled out a little bit. And if we stretch this out, it actually naturally wants to bring this panel in, which I love that it does that because we want this to roll into our door. Now, this is not at the height that it's going to ride at. There's about 10 or 12 inches that goes in here. But this is going to be a great transition. That's really going to run nicely down into this frame rail. Really going to like what's happening there. So what we're going to do here, we're going to get the cowl. We're going to set the cowl back up, get it back on here, get that radiator back on here, get that grill shell on here. I'm going to make a dummy with some lumber, a dummy radiator, and figure out exactly where we want that to be. We're going to start with it dropped down at 2 inches because we've dropped the cowl down 2 inches. But if we want it to come down a little bit more, we'll be able to do that. So let's get this stuff lined up and we'll get started. Just quick little tip. You need to hold this in position. I just made these little pins out of some welding rod. Works pretty good. Slides right in there, holds the two together. Okay, so we've got the radiator in, the grill shell on in the stock position. It's up 2 inches higher than the cowl because we took 2 inches out. The hood is running uphill. So we know we need to drop this down 2 inches. We may drop it down a little bit more. I know some guys that have dropped their grill shells down at the stock height with the cowl, and just to give it a little more aggressive look, and they like the lines tilted down more. So we're gonna drop this down 2 inches. I'm gonna build a dummy radiator to sit back into place. I'm gonna trim that hood. We're gonna flip it over, we're gonna lay it out on the table. I'll do a tracing around the stock shape, and then we'll rip 2 inches from this end down to nothing here. Put it back together, and then see what we've got to do to get it in the position to be square on each end. Let's get going. Okay, so we're gonna get these hood sides pulled off and lay them out on the table here. This is a part that's probably not incredibly necessary, but it's always good to know where you started from when you're modifying a stock part. And the end of this is square to the hinge. So it's square to the hinge. And the front is also a good little weld on this one. It makes it a little hard to hold up there, but it's also square to the hinge. So that will at least tell us this will tell us where we started. So if I bring this down and put it towards the end of the table, let's get a couple clamps. I like to hold things in place and kind of inspect them. Do a little visual engineering. There's a guy, very famous fabricator in Indianapolis in the racing world. His name was Don Brown. He was a race car driver himself, but one night he was sharing with me the idea of visual engineering. He told me that he had a customer one time that looked at his bill, and he saw on the bill that there were hours for visual engineering. And he said, "Don, what is that? What are you charging me?" He said, "Well, that's the time that I sat and I looked at your part and I figured out how I was going to do it. There's 9 or 10 ways to build that part, and that's the time that I spent figuring out which way I was going to build it." He said, "Don, I'm not paying you for that." And he said, "Well, one way I could have built it may have been 10 hours. And another way I could have built it would have been 5 hours. So if I spent 2 hours looking at it, you're ahead." And the guy paid the bill. Visual engineering. Well, it's a very important part of building stuff. Sitting and looking at things. There's times where I'll build stuff, I'll finish a part, and I'll sit and I'll just look at it for like an hour. Sit down with a beer or 2 or 3. And I'll just look at the part that I lined up on the bike or car, or whatever it is I'm working on. I'll just sit and look at it. And I'll think about the next process. Like, if you move this, if you're moving the cowl, then you got to move the hood. If you move the hood, then you've got to move the nose, the grill. Like, and what does that change? How does that work with your carburetors, your air cleaners? When you're sectioning the cowl, how does that work with your steering? How does it work with your headers? What kind of room are you going to have in there? And for a guy who doesn't build cars, I don't build cars. For a guy who doesn't build cars, it's very important to think your way through that process. Some guys have done this a million times, and they know exactly how much room they have. They know how far, they know what kind of movement happens if you use, a pickup steering box or something like that. They know what kind of drop you get if you drop your axle a couple inches, or if you take X amount of springs out, if you run these rims or those tires, and how much a particular tire grows at speed if you've got it in a tight fender well. That's something I learned the hard way years ago, back when building custom motorcycles, and you're putting a tire on a fender, and a customer wants a fender to be really slammed down. That was kind of the thing, in the early 2000s, as to get that fender real close to the tire. Well, the tire grows, and one brand of tire the same size grows differently than another brand of tire, and so you've got to know that if you're trying to get that fender as close as possible. So what we're going to do here, we need to take 2 inches out here and bring it down to nothing, and I sort of want to just figure out where that nothing is going to be. Now I'm going to put a couple of marks on here, just some arbitrary marks, and it'll tell me where this fender was. I'm just putting a couple little things here just so I know when I go to put it back on here, this is where it was. It's nice to have this sort of reference point. And so I know that what I need to end up with after I take this 2 inches out and I bring this back down, I need it to line back up right here where it is. It needs to come right back to this point and line right back up where it was here. So, now where are we going to take this out? Should we take it out right here at the hinge? Should we take it out really close and then try to weld this hinge on? I don't think so. This is already cut over this way. There's a couple little lips here in the end. I think I want to bring this in about an inch. I'm going to call it an inch. I'm going to bring it in an inch. I'm going to run right down that about an inch. Try to keep it as close to that hinge as possible, but keep it far enough away that if I want to get a good dolly on it, once we weld this back up and we want to get that slicked back out, give yourself enough room in the wheel. If you're going to put it in an English wheel, you're going to put it in a planishing hammer and some kind of yoder or something to smooth it out. Give yourself a little bit of room off of that. So you know what? Let's just take it on over. Let's take it on over about 2 inches. 2 inches sounds pretty good to me. Or let's take it over the width of this scale. That'll work. I think that's a good width. I don't need that. Right there. And right there. So that's where it's going to go. Now I don't need to really mark this whole line down this thing because I'm going to put it in the shear. The shear's going to tell me where this is. I'm going to take a little trip over to my buddy Denny's. Since I do motorcycles, I no longer need big tools. I gave my buddy Dave Shoemaker, got my last shear. I just had no use for it. It just was in my way a lot. I didn't use a lot of it. And he had a nice big new shop, and I thought, you know what? Dave will like that shear. So it's at Dave's. And Denny's is closer than Dave's. So I'm going to go to Denny's. So we're going to take 2 inches out of this thing. That's what we took out. We took 4 inches out of the cowl. And we're going to take 2 inches out of both sides of this. And that should be about where we're at. Now we've got this thing laid out here. We don't care where this end lives because we're going to have to reshape that up on here anyway. One thing I definitely know, I've helped a lot of people line their hoods up on their car. The radius on these, especially when they've sat around on shelves and been stored, they're nowhere near the radius of the grill shell or the cowl. They're off all over the place. It takes a little bit of finagling to get these lined back up. And this has a folded edge on it here. we'll make sure to put that back on. So we got this one lined up. Let's grab the other one and do the same. Now this one, it's the other way, but that's okay. Come back down here. Now if these are truly lined on that edge, will be square. And we're off a little bit on this end, but there's a little weld on this that's keeping this hinge from really locking to the edge of this cable. So it's off just a little bit. We'll once again make this mark the same place that one is, and we'll put this one in a little closer. We'll go the same route with this one. Two inches. There we go. Now, one of the problems that you have lining panels up like this is trying to get these body lines even. Now, I've made a mark here in the center of the cowl, and I'm going to be able to see if what I'm sectioning out of this is actually going to position this line properly from the center. Let's move the camera over this way. You can see my mark here, and we're going to line that mark up. And this should tell me if we're right. That looks like about the 2 inches that I thought we need to take out. Let's find out. We're on it. So that's exactly what we needed to do. We need to take out 2 inches. Let's go do it. Well, I guess we ought to do this side first. Make sure it's right. I'm confident in our cowl cuts. About 2 inches from the center. Arrived at Denny's. The shear will make a little more quick job of this and a lot cleaner cut. We go to put it back together. Roll a little smoother. So with the lip of the hinge here, I can't get it under the jaw. Slide it in. side. So we've got our first cut. Now we need to make our other angle cut. There it goes. Pays to have friends in high places with big tools. Let's go get them welded up. So after shearing things up at Denny's yesterday, the Hart women wanted to go have some dinner, so that's what we did. I'm back out here today. We're going to get this stuff welded up. Before we do, we need to get all these edges cleaned up where we're going to weld. Of course, generally speaking, it's very important to clean your metal before you start to weld. And it's not always convenient. It's not always easy on old, crusty, rusty stuff. There's a little bit of rust behind every panel, every divot, every rivet. And I use a ER70S2 wire. A lot of people use S6 on the old metal, especially if there's a lot of rust around, because it's got a little more silicate and manganese in it. And it flows a little smoother, and it's just a little more forgiving. But I bought I found this company in Weld, and they make this 035 wire, TIG wire, and it is ER70S2. And I've been using it for years. It's great for precision stuff. It's great for old stuff if you get it good and clean. I've never had an issue with it, and I just really like it. So I bought a lifetime supply of this stuff, and it's really great. And I just love that thinner 035 wire for doing real tight welding on real thin sheet metal. It works well for me, like I said, but it's important to get it really clean. Behind these folds, now I'm not sure about Ford as much, but I can tell you that in the early Harley-Davidson process, a lot of the parts were parkerized, and that parkerizing, even though you've blasted everything and you've cleaned everything, when you get to a piece that has a lip on it, that parkerizing is still back there waiting for you. Even some rust back in there. So when you go to weld over a doubled edge like this, you're going to run into it. And so you got to make sure you get everything clean. And when you get up to these edges here, you know, sometimes you can cheat a little bit and run a little bit cold over that, so you're not breaking through the backing material, the inner structure material, if you will. I'm always mindful of that. But we're going to get this cleaned up. I'm going to use my Scotch-Brite pad. I use that quite a bit for cleaning. If there's something flat that I can get to and I don't have to get the little spot blaster out, run over it with my Scotch-Brite to get the primer that's on this off. Then I'll hit it with my wire wheel and try to get everything just as clean as you can. Then I'll use this nice aluminum table for a backer. This is a 1-inch thick piece of aluminum, and it works really, really well for welding a nice long flat piece of carbon on it. So we'll get going. Let's move along. Okay, we got a couple dings right here in the front of both of these panels. I'm going to go ahead and try to knock that out a little bit, just get that flattened out before we start welding. Nice. Now there is some bigger pitting in this panel here, and I think I will go ahead with the porta blaster and just run along this edge right quick. Won't take but a second. Now we've got the edge of this stuff knocked down pretty well. I'm going to go ahead and give it a final wipe down with a little acetone. Like I said, you want to clean stuff as good as you can and be reasonable about it. I don't always clean stuff this well. I don't. I cheat it from time to time. But I give my customers everything that they pay for. It's not a high-end restoration. This is a hot rod, and it's going to have a little bit of a different finish on it. We'll talk about that later. But this is right up here on the table. It's just so easy. A nice flat, straight weld. We might as well clean it all up, you know? So we have a little bit of a change up in the plan here. Originally, I was going to clamp this to the table and have this nice big chunk of aluminum as a backer for this weld, which is always nice. But if I weld on the underside of this hood, we'll have filler issues on the top side of the hood. And I don't want to run back and do another pass and start getting that sheet metal wavy. So I'd rather just weld it on the top. So I'm going to take this piece of aluminum angle and I'm going to clamp it to this aluminum angle. And then, you know, one benefit is I'll be able to position it however I want. And when you're TIG welding, positioning is everything. One of the good things I learned early on was guys showing me, take some blocks, take some things, stack your hands up to get in position. It's always best to slow down, find the stuff, and get in a good position before you're welding. So that'll be easier to move this around. Okay, we'll run a few tack welds across this thing and then start stitching it together. So what I like to do is stitch some tack welds across every couple of inches, 2 or 3 inches, and then work my way back across a weld and put a tack in between those, just allowing the metal to cool back down and not get too hot in one area. Just trying to keep it flat, trying to keep warpage to a minimum. It's, as you know, if you've welded a lot of this stuff, you know that when you weld real thin material, especially if it's not on a radius somewhere that's like holding it in that place, there's a lot of movement. It warps a lot. The heat really changes, and the stretching and the shrinking and the pulling in. So welding, I weld on the lowest amperage possible. I'm welding it, I have my welder set at 75 right now. I'll show you kind of what I'm talking about. You can see I'm running along and I'm starting to stitch them back in a little closer towards the bottom, working my way back this direction here. And I will weld this panel very slowly. I'll probably weld a 1/2 inch at a time here and there, working my way back and forth, just moving around and letting things cool. That's very important when you're welding this thin stuff. A lot of the old knucklehead stuff that I weld, the early Harley stuff, it's very, very thin, super thin gauge, and it moves around a lot. So you just have to be patient and not get in a big hurry. Okay, so we've got a nice group of tacks on here. It's looking pretty good. And what I'll do now is I'll go in here. I'll end up repositioning some of these clamps, but I will start back down here, and I'll do like a 1/2 inch weld here and a 1/2 inch weld here, and I'll just kind of move around a little bit until I'm starting to fill it up. We're not doing a structural weld here, so there's a little more art involved in it. Working outside is a lot of fun, but you have to be careful with the wind sometimes blowing your shielding gas around. Some of you outdoor welding guys know this. You just have to be patient. Like I said, don't get in a hurry. If the wind's up a little bit, stop, go do something else. maintaining its flatness quite well, actually. We'll have some movement. There's always some movement. If the wind could slow down a little bit, that'd be really nice. It sure feels good. It's really hot and humid in Indiana right now. So having a breeze is quite nice. Not when you're trying to weld. I try to get these welds as wide as one of my clamps. That way I can take my clamp off and I can just stick it right on top of one of those welds when I open up a new spot. Because we are slowly running out of room to keep it even. So we're going to have to move these clamps around a little bit. Like I said, we're using some very low amperage. We're getting plenty of penetration, but keeping that puddle nice and tight and trying to use as little heat as possible just where you need it. You can see we're running some small welds and we're starting to get some things stitched together. I think it's about time to move these clamps around. Jed, clamp it. As my buddy Danny used to say. Jed, clamp it, Jay. And by the way, when you put your clamps on things like this, get them, tight enough that your material's not moving around, but it's a good idea to not squeeze the daylights out of it, because when you heat that up, the clamp is creating the wave. There's a balance. There's a balance to everything in life. Okay, we got it welded up. We're going to leave the ends open, so when we figure out what we need to trim, I won't have to trim through a welded piece. We can finish that up as when we lay on whatever we need to change there. We'll let this cool. We'll let this cool down just the way it is. So this is where we've ended up. Good penetration on the other side. And looking down it, we're pretty flat. Not going to be a whole lot of dressing to get this right. So let's get started on the other one. Okay, we got these things all stitched up. I'm super stoked about it. They look great. We kept our cool, literally, by moving around and not allowing any one area to get all too hot. We've been able to maintain some nice flat panels here, and we knocked those welds off. There's not going to be a lot of dolly work to do. So this is a good stopping point for tonight. I'll see y'all back in here in the morning. All right, so we got our hood all zipped up last night. Now it's time to drop this grill shell down and start massaging the new geometry of the hood to get it to fit properly. We know these skirts are about 33. We know that the seam is about 32 inches. And that puts the tank filler, the filler bung on the radiator, at about 33 inches. Now I'm not gonna cut this core up just yet, but I got this old Harley tranny sprocket, and it's about the same diameter. So we're gonna incorporate that into the build of this dummy to put it in position. So let's get going on that. Okay, we got our dummy radiator all into place here and measures out nicely. Got the bung at 33 where it goes. We have this moved down 2 inches. I was able to take a 2x4 in behind here and brace this up temporarily so we can do our work on the hood. By the way, if you're not using 2x4 lumber to build your hot rod, you're missing out on a whole lot of fun. It's a hot rod. I told you I was going to be using lumber. So let's see if this grill shell fits on here. You'll see this the first time I see it. I have not tried it, but it ought to work out just fine. I don't see why it wouldn't. Here we go. Like a glove. And it looks like we're going to be able to put some screws on here to set that in place to adjust for our skirts. And we're about where we need to be. We're right here at 33 and 32 here. May need to adjust this in just a little bit here in the top, but that's why we made this. It's going to work out great. So I'll adjust that. I'll get the hood sides and we'll get to work. Okay, I've been putting off thinking about the geometry of this hood until right now because we knew we had to do all the other things. We knew we had to take the 2 inches out. But what do we know about this hood? We know that it's square to the hinge. It has to be because the center line of the hood has to be square to the cowl and it has to be square to the grill shell. So I know that if I come here and I make my mark at 90 degrees and I come right along this edge and I trim that off, that's where this is supposed to live. Supposed to live. Same on the front. So if we go to the nose, it's the same on the nose. We come down here and I make it mark at 90 degrees. I know this is what I'm missing and what I have to add there. But there's a radius out here in this old tin. It moves around. When you're working with old metal, it moves around. It's not sitting the way that it's supposed to right now. It has to be fitted to that cowl. So I'm going to be very careful about following my instinct of just cutting that off at 90 and following this radius around the square. That's where it should be. But I'm going to slow down a bit. I'm going to put this together. I'm going to set it up on the car and see what we've got hanging over on each end. Okay, so we have the cowl on here now and lined up. We can see in the front what we're missing. And we can see in the rear what we're going to need to get that to sit down in there. Now, we do have to take into account the fact that there's the belt along here. But I've got a plan to adjust this. I'll be able to tune this to drop that line right with that line no matter what we end up with. But we've got to get it square with the cowl first. My guess is we'll be trimming off something back here and we'll be moving it to this side in the front. Let's check it out. So what I've done here is I traced a pattern using the old dirty fingers method off of what our original square line was here. I traced that pattern off, and since we know that's the correct shape, or supposed to be the correct shape for this hood, we're just transferring that same curve up to our new square line that we put on. Double check one. Nothing wrong with that. There we go. That's where we're going to start. And my guess is that we're going to trim that off. And that piece is going to end up going to the front of this one. I'm going to trim that off and put it on the nose of this one. I'll bet that's where we're at. We'll see. The hood is on. I couldn't be happier. This looks so good. The body lines are lining up. Nice and square. Got my hood shifted just a little bit from side to side. The body lines look nice. It'd be easy to describe this off. Get that corner square. Let's see how my theory went. Here's the piece that came off of this side, and I can already see this is going to be what we want. We get this reshaped, tacked on here in the front, we really got something. Let's move along. So on second thought, rather than welding a tiny little piece on the end of this, we're going to put a doubler on it anyway, and I'll fuse weld the outer edge of this. But rather than putting this little piece on there, I thought it would be better if I actually put a thicker piece on. And then once we get the belts on in these grooves, we'll be able to tune this a little bit better. Okay, we got our pieces welded in. I'm glad I took more off of the original hood to give myself room to weld, and we'll have a little more cushion, but it's lining up so nicely. I mean, this is easily tunable. I mean, we've got a really good gap going around this whole piece here. Once we get this all in place and get the belts on it, we'll be able to tune that in to where it's just perfect. I'm really, really happy here. It's a nice gap. Got a little shadow on that there, but it really is nice. So we want to see the finished product here. The finished product for this episode. Here's where we got for part 3. Now you want to see a beautiful picture? I just love how streamlined this looks. We maintained all the 32 features and got a much more narrow car. That grill shell dropped down. These body lines lined up really nicely. We've got the tail in position where it goes. How about that? You can see where this body's going to flow down the side of the frame. I just love that narrow cockpit right there. And I love that we've maintained all the 32 features up in the front. We got the body line flowing right now. I measured the rear and the front, and they're both sitting about 34 3/4 right now. And that's about where the car is going to sit. Very happy. Well, I'm super stoked about the progress that we made on this part. I think we got a lot done. We answered a lot of unanswered questions. And next week, we'll move on back to the rear cross member, start figuring out our suspension, figure out what our ride height's going to be. I think I'm an inch or two lower than I want to be right here, but we'll get all that figured out. Thank you again for liking and sharing and subscribing to this channel. It means a lot to me. I'm blown away by the interest in my first hot rod build. So just keep the comments coming. You guys are making it real easy for me. I had no idea that I was going to have this much fun filming this stuff and sticking it on YouTube. So thank you so much for that, and please keep it up. But it's Tuesday night, and you know it's hot rod night over at my buddy Denny's, and there's a bunch of guys over there with some chicken gumbo, and you know I need it. So I'm going to head over there, and I'll see you back next week.